Are you having a hard time keeping up with the changing headlines and news narratives? Well, don't feel alone.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
So you look at some of the headlines today and think about the headlines of just a month or two ago and how they've dramatically changed. And I'm looking at one, for example, nuclear power, gold as money, and the forced pragmatism of wartime's harsh reality. As I said on yesterday's program, we need to put out a silver alert for Dr. Anthony Fauci. All of a sudden, COVID has exited stage left as war footing comes in on stage right. My belief is we're going to be bombarded with all types of bad news headlines over the months ahead. And many will wish we had COVID back. It'll be a lot easier to deal with. Then I saw what I considered absolutely the most ridiculous headline that I think I've seen in all of this. Once again, the media knows there's a short attention span. Gin up the fear. Now, when you move that one aside, people will forget very quickly. They count on your forgetfulness. Politicians count on you forgetting. And somehow we went from a deadly virus and everybody must be vaccinated to save the world to Putin is a bad person. And I'm sure that he is, but I'm saying our focus has been moved. It helps cover the tracks of the failing COVID narrative that we talked about in December, that the narrative was going to collapse. Boy, did it collapse. Then I saw this, but not totally. Ready.gov is the website for preparedness from the United States government and emergency management. And here's the stupidest headline I've ever read. Don't forget to wear a mask during a nuclear holocaust. In other words, when you got to go down to the fallout shelter because of thermal nuclear war, be sure to keep up your social distancing, and if you're stuck down there for days with non-family members, be sure to wear a face mask. My guest today is the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles. Dr. Gahles, when the sirens go off and you head to the fallout shelter, will you be masking up with the rest of those living in fear?
Absolutely. I make sure I have lots of those little blue masks that we change them every hour on the hour, 6 feet distance from one another. That's clearly going to save us from radiation poisoning, nuclear fallout. Those who've gotten the shot don't have to worry about that, right?
I know, that's right. I mean, if you got the shot and you got your face diaper, you're going to be perfect.
Survive COVID, not the nuclear attack, but COVID for sure.
I mentioned on yesterday's program, it's time to put out a silver alert for a guy by the name of Dr. Fauci. He hasn't been seen in about 2 weeks. Right. He's disappeared from my TV set. What happened to Fauci? Not a word out of him.
Nope.
And so, obviously, thermal nuclear war, to me, is always going to be a danger in our lives. It could happen because there are madmen, satanically inspired, that will, if they don't get their way, they'll commit suicide and take the world with them.
Sure.
We got to think in those terms, because that's precisely what is happening. We have madmen in charge.
We do. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because some years ago, before we had this conspiracy theory term that we would label people with, a gentleman, a history professor I knew, said to me, there's two ways to view history, either the accidental view or the conspiratorial view. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, we know the Catalonian conspiracy in Rome. We know that there were plenty of conspiracies to overthrow rulers, countries, kings throughout history. Conspiracy is nothing new. And he said, but the accidental view, we tend to think that everything happening in the world just happened because some one guy jumped up and decided he's going to be a nut and take over the world. And no. It never happens that way. Politics don't happen accidentally.
They don't.
It never happens that way. So how do we look at these things? I can say this, okay, in all honesty, from what I've read and things, I see that, this nuclear threat, although they're definitely using it for fearmonger, but it is a real possibility. At least limited, according to many of the these elite, these individuals, the Schwab group, who say in their quest to take over, to bring in this new world order, this great reset, whatever you want to call it, this is like one of the options on the table. It was mentioned in the Club of Rome. There were a lot of places where they mentioned it, and what you're looking at is if they come out, even H.G. Wells, in his book, The Open Conspiracy, which he wrote, he talked about this. He said at the very end of our plan to bring in this world government, he said, we're going to have to expose ourselves. And when we expose ourselves, there's going to be a massive resistance against us, and we're going to have to make a mad dash for the finish line.
That's right.
And their idea here is that they're going to use whatever's at their disposal. So if it's a virus, if it's, war, it's going to be war. If it's a limited nuclear exchange, they'll do it. They'll do it in a few places, which would petrify everybody in the world. And they would once again regain control. So I don't see it as something that could not happen, especially since we know this is planned in many ways. Not that there aren't unintended consequences that will occur with them, but that's why they war game things. But this is on the agenda.
Oh, that's why we have tabletop exercises for every. By the way, just something that I happened to run across the other day that you might be interested in. You and I have talked about something that the World Economic Forum has been pushing for a long time. And they were going to have an exercise called the Cyber Polygon. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't find it on their website anymore. It disappeared.
Because it's going to become reality very soon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to clear before I forget, and this is important. You and I were talking last week, and I had a listener that wrote, and I think misunderstood some of what we were saying, which I can understand, especially if you're listening on shortwave and you may miss a few minutes, and I get it. I want to make people understand that in no way, when we talk about the Russia conflict in Ukraine, we're not taking sides, and I am not an apologist for Vladimir Putin under any circumstance at all, period. I'm just trying to help. We're just trying to help people understand the stories, plural, behind the story, and how you're just being fed what people want you to hear. And I don't care if it's CNN or Fox. There's a certain level of rah, it's our side, man. We got to get rid of the Russian vodka,
Right. Russian vodka.
And then like anybody.
Exception to that.
Well, considering, and I'm just saying this, a little bit of research. Most of the vodka you buy in your ABC stores around the United States or Canada or anywhere else, they're made in places like Texas, or they're made Tennessee, So it's half of these things that look like Russian vodka are actually American made or Canadian made. But I'm just saying, we get caught in these bandwagons, and we live for the headline and the soundbite, never understanding how long these processes have been in place, decades in some case.
Many decades.
2014, we had the Obama administration here in the United States, who literally allowed Putin to walk in and take Crimea. I mean, did they stop him? Did they do anything that was real? Did they make a little bit of noise? Yeah, of course. That's how the game is played. And nobody in 2014 at CNN, nobody in 2014 at the New York Times or MSNBC was having these big cry fest over the fate of Crimea. And nobody was concerned about the, shall we say, the political coup that occurred in Ukraine at the same time, and who fostered that coup of government in Ukraine. We did. So we created the puppet government that has and I'm going to say this, a lot of people don't know. A lot of people are hero worshiping, Zelensky, as the great savior of Ukraine, not realizing that prior to being president, he was a comedian and also an admirer of Justin Trudeau and the World Economic Forum. And people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. I mean, a lot of these people all over the world, they're just doing the bidding of their, shall we say, handlers. And I think it's no different. I'm not apologizing. I'm not apologizing for Putin at all. I think going into a nation like that, killing civilians, it makes him a war criminal. I agree on that premise. I'm just saying, understand where all this comes from. And we need to begin to recognize that, just because NATO is not always wearing the white hat, neither is the United States, Germany, and all these, well, everybody's saying we got to punish Russia. Okay. They provide a third of the world's wheat, 1/3.
Yep.
They provide half of all the natural gas to Germany, and in some countries' cases, close to or right at 100% in Europe. They're dependent. Do you think they're going to cut off their gas and food supply because they're mad?
It's almost like this is purposely being done. It could have been stopped. We know that they do. Look, a third of the wheat exports also come from Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're talking 2/3 of the world's wheat exports will cease. You've got Hungary now who jumped back and said they're no longer going to export any, and they're one of the top exporters in Europe.
Right.
Because they realize famine is coming because there's going to be wheat shortages across the world and food shortages everywhere. When you're looking at what's happening here, you see there's a concerted effort to bring about the shortages in food, shortages in supply chains. But we also said last time what we're seeing here is theater. Okay, it's theater because of Putin's relationship with Schwab alone.
And China.
Yes, and China, who just abstained from voting down Russia's actions in the UN. And Russia will do likewise if China happens to invade Taiwan. Then we'll have a two-front war.
Look,
but what we're seeing, this is what we're seeing. They're supporting one another. And my biggest issue that I see going on here is behind what we call the fog of war. We're watching that they are still rolling out digital currencies and digital IDs everywhere. Lugano in Switzerland just came out and said
Australia.
They're going to make Bitcoin. They're going to make Bitcoin legal tender. Australia's removing Mac machines, Mac card machines, money machines, and putting in digital currency. So, folks, remember I said the left hand, you keep an eye on what the left hand is doing over here.
And what you and I were talking the other day, that really the digital currency is almost like 95% in place, and most people don't recognize it. I was thinking, my wife and I, she's old school, and she admits it. She misses the days when the bank would mail you back a check. Remember those days? That big envelope once a month and every check you wrote, and then it went to pictures and and I look at how many checks that I write in the course of a month for this ministry, and personally, I write like one check or two checks a month maximum. That's it. Right. That's it. It used to be that I can remember back in the 1980s and 90s, I was writing 2 or 3 checks a day for things. Back in the small town America where you could write a check for gasoline. Remember those days? If they knew you well enough, yeah, you could write a check for gas. You could write a check for anything, sure. and nobody looked. Well, you put cash in the bank or a check, and you could take cash out to the grocery store or just write a check. You could even write it for $25 over, and get that cash from your grocery store. Did it all the time. You can't do that anymore.
No.
Those days are gone.
And the whole idea of the cash, the idea is to destroy the dollar, right? And to destroy the currency of America.
That's what Russia and China both, listen. When Biden, I want you to comment on this. All this rhetoric, we're going to get the Russia, we're going to get them out of most of the SWIFT system. Not all of it, but most of it. That it's not that they're totally out, but they're partially out.
Right.
How bad does that really hurt them? Because for how many years now have they been developing, along with China, their own financial message system? They don't need us. They don't need SWIFT. They can live without it. They've been building a new one for, I don't know, for about 3-4 years now, at least. And so China has KIPS and CIPS, whatever it is, China Interbank, that's doing, I don't know how many trillions of dollars in moving money or moving fake currency.
Yep.
And the Russians have developed their own as well. And so if you want to buy Russian gas, if you want to get Russian oil, and we're doing 600,000 barrels a day from Russia here in the United States, you're not using the SWIFT system anyway. You're using theirs to buy it. So it's a joke. It's a smoke and mirror game. Yeah, we got Russia. We got them where we want them. We got them out of the SWIFT system. Well, they don't use it.
That's right.
For much.
Well, here's the thing. I just heard this, and I haven't confirmed it yet, but somebody had just mentioned to me that, Putin just backed the ruble with gold-backed currency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that is the case, we are done. We're done as the dollar being the world currency. It's fiat. So when you have a gold-backed currency against the fiat currency is going to lose every time. And as we see them doing this with China, these are both the rising stars in the East, right? Compared to the West, which has what do we have, like $50 trillion in debt? Our currency is going to be worth nothing. But this is all part of the phase we're in.
It's part of the plan.
Yes, and that's why I called it phase 2 of the globalists, right? We're in the phase 2, and we've now gone from the COVID pandemic phase to the Hunger Game phase to the nuclear war phase. And that's exactly where we are. So those fears of food shortages, fears of not being able to buy gas anymore are going to be very real, plus the fear of war. Everything they say, people are going to conform and do because they're looking out for you.
I'm looking for you had mentioned that, and I had a story here, and if I can just get my hands on it, it may take me a moment, and I'll get back to it. But you're right, gold is currency. It's coming back. There's something else people don't realize. Once again, my memory at my age, sometimes I have notes here, and I can't read my own writing. There is a rare metal that is very necessary for the catalytic converters in your new car and to replace the ones that get stolen in your old car, which happens in some parts of the world. And guess where that metal comes from, or the vast majority, like 90+%? From Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once again, you start losing chips that are not being made here. You're using a metal that comes from Russia. We're going to cripple our automotive industry. We're going to cripple a lot of industries, just one little piece at a time.
Haven't we done that already with the lockdowns, right? And we're going to make it even worse now. And we're doing foolish things like Russian vodka ban. Some Russian businessman was thrown out of his apartment in New York because he's Russian.
Yeah.
And then I just saw also Russian cats are now no longer able to compete in these cat contests.
I know this is
and
like
it's everything Russian. Remember that show?
But it's brainwashing. I'm sorry. It's yes, I do remember that movie. I really do. I also remember another.
Again.
What was that other movie where Slim Pickens is riding the nuclear bomb out of the chassis of a B-50 whatever it is, Stratoforce.
It's common.
I mean,
and the sad part is this. I would just couple it by saying this. There is a difference between Russians and Soviets. Russian people are good people.
Yes.
Many of them are really good people with a culture very old, 1,000 years. I mean, they have a beautiful culture, beautiful people, and many of them can't stand the communist Soviets.
No, and which are still in charge in their own way.
That's right.
They just changed the titles, the names. It's still the Kremlin. It's still the same people that staffed it before.
Sure.
But they just painted a happy face on it.
People aren't making that distinction of Russian.
By the way, I'm glad you said something that needs. I had a conversation just this past week with somebody that you'll be hearing eventually on this program. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, except to tell you that she was born and raised as a young child in the Soviet Union. And she and her family were one of the rarities that prior to the fall of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall coming down and all of that, happened to end up in the country of Canada. And I'll get that whole story later. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And here's what people don't understand. And she and I in our kind of pre-conversation to talk about the things she wants to share. And believe me, God is using her in an incredible ministry, really an incredible ministry. What a gifted writer and just a news analyst. I mean, she can read this stuff. And I tell you, she picks up on the nuances most people don't. And I said, so what was it like being raised in the Soviet Union? And she pauses and goes, yeah, it wasn't bad. And what do you mean? She said, unless you lived right in front of the Kremlin or right, in downtown Moscow or in downtown Leningrad, for the most part, we all thought the Communist Party was a joke, and we joked about it. Nobody was disappearing. We grew our crops. We even worshipped, and I became a Christian during that time, a born-again Christian, and life was not bad. Getting medical, I mean, she said it was not a bad life. She said, I'm more, we come to a free nation, this is years ago now, in Canada, mm-hmm. And she said, there's more bureaucracy nonsense going on in Canada than I ever faced as a child and a young teenager in the Soviet Union. And mm-hmm, which ought to make you think for a second, that sometimes we're believing the rhetoric. And now, she said, of course, obviously, she said the government is evil and their intent back then, domination of the world, it's all the same satanic desires that mm-hmm, drive absolutely. The madmen. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But, they were smart enough in the Soviet Union not to poke the people too hard lest they poke back. And they didn't want that.
Right. Well, they didn't want it because of numbers, but not because the people are armed, right? And mm-hmm. in this government, in our country, that's the difference. People are armed and we have numbers. So they've got to deal with that in
at least for now.
Way. Yes, at least for now. Fear does incredible things to people. So the oppression in communism is still there. We're seeing it come around the world now and take over Western countries, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Germany, you name it. And if you think it's going to change with a war and that Russia's the bad guy, here's the thing. We're implementing the ideology of old Russia in the West, in these nations, and yet we're really ticked off at Russia doing what we're simply imbibing now.
Yeah. Yep.
And nobody's putting two and two together because we've lost the art of discernment. We've lost the art to think, and we are glued to television and we're watching programs which are there to program us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I've been feeling this for 2 years, and it's been a growing thing over 2 years now. When I look at what we did with the pandemic, and I looked how they've tried to extend this crisis beyond its expiration date, and the truth is, during this time of shall we say ginning up a war with Putin and the former Soviet Union and their former satellites, which is what they are, I think one guy wrote an article. And I want you to comment on this. We'll have a break coming up in just a couple of moments, but I want you to comment on this. And there's an element of truth. Once again, I'm going to make sure that listeners don't think we're playing apologists for Putin. We are not in any shape, manner, or form. I'm just observing all the pieces of the puzzle out there that a lot of people are missing. In many ways, half the battle of what Putin wants, he's already won. Half the battle. Now, Germany and other countries, no, Ukraine will not be a part of NATO. There's half the battle right there. Now, the other half is, will Ukraine become a member of the European Union? Your comment on that one?
what is the European Union? It is a small microcosm of the macrocosm of world government. So I don't think the European Union is going to be around too much longer. I think as we're fighting with these dichotomies and these this paradigm that they're putting us in, what we're going to see happening is, before we know it, we're going to wake up one day and realize in the midst of this war, somehow we became communist. Somehow we became a totalitarian country. Somehow we're in a dictatorship and we never saw it coming, because everything we okayed to be implemented for our safety, for the good of the people, for the health of the nation. That's right. And so even if you listen to the State of the Union address, you heard all of this stuff about electric cars.
Well, I call it the state of our misery address.
Right. The state of, what did he say, address? But the fact of the matter is, they called for these electric cars and the car batteries. And listen, this goes back to the Kyoto Protocol.
We don't make the batteries in the United States or Canada.
That's
we
right.
don't have the resources. We've got to go to Russia and China to get our stuff to make batteries, or go to some country in Africa, which is already in the Russian sphere or the Chinese sphere. Don't fool yourself. We're not 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, it ain't coming back like it once was. We're not going to the Iron Range to get, titanium and anything else that we need to build this stuff.
Well, as depressing as it is, this is the agenda. It is, in order for a world government to come into existence, which clearly they're doing, you have to get rid of the United States. We cannot be the world power anymore. They're done with us, in other words.
Listen, I'm a, how do I put it, conservative, church going, whatever you want to call it, the epitome of the flag waving American, apple pie mother and the whole 9 yards. But I recognize a reality, a biblical reality, that for this country was doomed to end because of our own sin against God.
Yep.
God has deplatformed us as a nation.
I agree with
and
that.
I think God is deplatforming what was once the greatest power for a reign of time and a beacon of freedom. And starting after 1989, it's been on a steady decline to get us out of that position. Sure. And I mean, not that we were always perfect. Trust me, we were not. We can look over 100 and some odd years of history prior to 1980 that prove that we were not always a good and godly people, but we were one of the most blessed nations upon the face of the earth. And once we turned our back as a government on God, God's hand of protection is being lifted, the blessings are vanishing, and Christians are going to have to begin to think in terms of community.
Yep. Well, it goes all the way back. And even implementing in late 90s the Kyoto protocols, which were dealing with supposed future climate change and all of that, and the greenhouse effect. When you look at what they were saying back then, they were saying every nation, we've got to stop travel. We've got to stop all this airplanes. We've got to stop cars.
Unless you're John Kerry, then you can fly in a private plane anywhere you want to go. I had somebody, it's okay. I had somebody make a comment saying, well, there's something good about this whole war. It's going to get all those SUV gas guzzlers having to think twice about filling up. Yeah. And I said, you are the perfect, what Stalin called, useful idiot.
Yep.
And I said, I don't mean to insult you, but I want you to back up one step. We have the ability of creating that energy, also knowing that a day will come as science advances. We're not going to need that kind of energy. I mean, science progresses at the pace that it can. You can't force it. And then people don't understand that little concept.
They don't.
And I said, so all those people that are screaming, Green New Deal for you, but not for me, like the John Kerrys. I said, so the rich elites and the Bill Gates and everybody else can fly their planes, have their yachts, and you're going to be sitting on government gas rationing coupons. I said, you are the perfect, useful idiot to this government. Be proud of yourself and wear that honor. And he doesn't get it.
Well, you look at it, right? The Kyoto Protocols, honestly, we're discussing having the majority of people in the world use bicycles to travel like China.
Or
right?
feet.
So, yeah. So being able to travel far is not the issue anymore. They don't want you to. And that's when you have these batteries in cars, you're not going to be able to drive far like you did on a full tank of gas. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to recharge if there's a recharging station. Do you think they're going to put a recharging outlet in the Rockies? Do you think they're going to put it out in the middle of the desert in California or Arizona? Not many. I can tell you that now. This is to keep us in a certain radius of travel and ultimately towards smart cities where we're watched and recorded and controlled and all of those things that we've talked about in the past. That's part of the Great Reset. So you think you're saving the environment. Everything that is being done to supposedly save the environment is to enslave you, I'm sorry to say.
Hey, Dr. Gahles, we need to take a quick break, and I want to pick up on a couple of other news stories and thoughts that I think are being missed by most of the media, and a lot of people are just so focused on whatever the media feeds them today, they can't think a lot of stuff through. Don't feel bad. It's hard to keep up, and I do the best that I can to help you keep up. Do you believe in our ministry here and the work we're trying to do? And there's a lot I'll be sharing later this week. Just God is laying so much on my heart, and I want to share it with you. But if you believe in keeping us on international shortwave and on radio, would you consider making a gift payable to Ancient Word Radio? Ancient Word Radio. And our mailing address is Truth to Ponder. That is Truth to Ponder, 5753, 5753, Highway 85 North. That's 5753, Highway 85 North. And we have a secure box number 3248. That's number 3248. 5753, Highway 85 North, number 3248. And we are in Crestview, Florida, and the zip code is 32536. That's Crestview, Florida, and the zip code 32536.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
The supernatural date code coming up. Shalom Aleichem. This is the nice Jewish boy, Jonathan Kahn, your Jewish connection, bringing you the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus. Now get your pen out as fast as you can so you don't miss out on receiving a special free gift you're going to get and love in a moment. I once typed a memo to one of my staff workers, and I gave it to her on computer, and she was only able to get to it about a week later. She was amazed because the date on the memo was the very date she decided to open up that thing a week later. She was in awe. She thought it was by the power of the Spirit I foreknew the exact date she would open up the document. Well, it wasn't by any supernatural power. It was simply the date code. When I dated the letter, I used the date code. The date code continually changes, updates itself every day. So whenever you open the document, the date will be for that day. I explained it to her and her wonder faded away. But you know, there's a secret here that can change your life. See, the Bible has a date code. You won't see it pop up in the text, but it's there. The Bible was written thousands of years ago, but it has a supernatural date code. That is, every time you open up the Bible, you're not reading a word for 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. You're reading a word that is dated for today. The Word of God is alive. It's newer than today's news. God's Word is dated for today, not even yesterday. The Word you got yesterday, if you look at it today, it's not dated for yesterday. It's dated for today now. The Word you got this morning, if you look at it tonight, you'll find it's not dated for this morning anymore. It's dated for tonight, the moment you receive it. Receive the Word in a new way, as if every word were dated for today, to be received fresh, to be put into effect fresh, to be applied today, to be obeyed, followed, believed, and walked in today. Open up the Bible today and see in the Spirit the fresh, living Word God has for you right now, specifically for this day. It can change your life when you discover it, that every scripture contains within it, the moment you receive it, a supernatural date code. Want more? Ask for Gumby's Secret. Now, what if you could receive daily vitamins guaranteed to strengthen your spiritual walk with God? Well, you can. A free subscription to Sapphires, daily spiritual vitamins for a victorious walk with God, updates on Israel prophecy, and the incredible Mystery of the Temple Doors. You'll love it all free. How do you get it? Easy. Just remember Jesus' real Hebrew name, Yeshua, and you dial it. That's it. Just dial 1-800-YESHUA-1. To receive your free gifts, you will be blessed, but call now, 1-800-YESHUA-1. and it can actually spread salvation around the world for very little through shortwave radio from the Arctic Circle to Israel. It's amazing. It's like sending 1 billion tracks around the world. How? Well, just call 1-800-YESHUA-1. It's amazing. You can blanket the earth the farthest way you'll ever spread the gospel. To be part, just call YESHUA-1. Or you can write me direct. Here's how. Just write to the Nice Jewish Boy at Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. It's a Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. Well, till next time, this is Jonathan Kahn saying, receive the word today, my friend, fresh. Shalom Alechem, peace be to you, my friend, in Messiah, Yeshua Tenu, our salvation.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of the Tuesday edition of Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. I've been reading some stories, and you may have seen this before. If you haven't, you need to. Mark Zuckerberg, he talks about what he calls his metaverse. This is going to be the alternate reality where instead of going to work, you put on your goggles and you're in this virtual world. And Mark Zuckerberg and all the elites are saying, we're going to cure all disease in this alternate reality. You will never be sick again. This sounds like an incredible science fiction project. And so, Dr. Gahles, when they're talking about curing all disease in the metaverse, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, the elite want to get rid of a disease. They're not talking COVID. We're thinking things like viruses. To them, we are the disease. So the metaverse is a way of getting rid of us, but controlling us until that point is reached. Mm-hmm. So they're getting rid of us through the shots, through these lockdowns and everything, and through war. That will get rid of a certain amount of people, and then hunger. But once they have you in the metaverse, I mean, understand what was said about the metaverse, that you will leave reality. Not part of reality or 2 hours of reality.
No, you're gone.
Totally. You are going to be removed.
You'll never have to leave your little cubicle again. That that Klaus Schwab will give you. You won't even own it.
That's right.
Klaus Schwab will own your goggles and your headphones and your little tiny space that you are connected digitally to this alternate reality.
That's right. And you'll starve and be malnourished and you'll die and they'll take you away and that'll be that. You're out of the metaverse. You're gone. And in reality, you're dead. And that'll be happening over and over. Mm-hmm. So it's pure control. It's something out of sci-fi that you probably can't even believe it really exists and would happen, but they're saying it. They're creating it. They're saying it. They're slowly inculcating people into it through the phones and through all of these different avenues.
Let me tell you something. And I get people mad at me whenever I say this in any kind of a social media site or even in person. I have said one of the greatest dangers that we ever faced, and I saw the transition from the 1980s to the late 90s. Video games in the 1980s were pretty benign because they were cartoonish. They were not real. You're looking at Mario running up and down, with a cartoon barrel being thrown at him. It's kind of like watching a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and it was fun. But then the games started becoming more real, and the video and the graphics more intense, the audio more surrounding, not just some little tiny speaker in the back of an arcade game.
Right.
And people started moving gently, some people more than others who were more susceptible, the outcast. Look at Columbine. Every one of those involved in Columbine back in 99. We're into the newest form of high definition video games.
Right.
And they couldn't get enough thrill any longer. And I realized then that for many people, these video games could become an addiction. I know too many people, way too many, that spend way too many hours in that alternate reality of a video game. Now,
Yes.
people that are older and only use so many hours, they can differentiate the line between reality and being in this, alternate reality. But younger kids that you're starting out in the high chair with the phone, you're getting them your old phone and they're sitting there just glued to it. And then you're happy to get them an Xbox or the PlayStation, whatever the device of the day is. I don't even pay attention.
Yeah, we started off.
And for hours at a time, they're in their rooms, like for 2, 3, 5, 8 hours all night. And now they're connected online playing with people they've never met. Yep. And they're in there with their alternate reality. It's going to be one step for them to leave this world and enter the metaverse. Just one simple step. And many are already prepared for it because they do not socialize. They do not meet with real people. They're afraid to meet with real people. They're afraid to take on the real challenges of life. And this is going to be so appealing for those that don't want to have any responsibility.
Yeah, this was all planned that way. It's just like what you said, right? So they're going to slip right into it. Their whole social life, everything about their world is in that video game or in the online, right? So this is exactly what they're doing purposely in order to merge man with machine. And as Schwab said, you're going to not only merge man with machine, he goes, and it's not even a question of conforming your behavior. You're not going to change outwardly. You're going to change inwardly through gene editing, which they're doing with these shots now, DNA changers.
And a lot of people, remember if you said that a year ago on Facebook, that was misinformation and COVID, and they'd be all over you.
Yep.
And now we're finding out that some of these spike proteins begin to through
the reverse transcriptase, which I said on your show probably a year ago.
And we're discovering it in the liver.
Yeah.
And that's where it's in other places, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but we know that.
Actually, Dr. McCullough came out and he said, you've got now coroners around the country who are coming out and saying these spike proteins and everything, they're finding them in every part of the body, the brain, the livers, everywhere.
Now, speaking of spike proteins, I'm glad you said that. And I'm sure that you've read this story too. And a lot of our listeners don't know this one. Somebody pointed out something that there was a patent that goes back to 2018 or early 2019.
2017.
Oh, 17? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. Before it appeared. That's Moderna.
Yep.
And they have a patent for a sequence for a virus.
You got it.
Now, why would they have a patent for a virus sequence? Now, mathematically speaking, the estimates run that the odds of it, that by the year 2019, from the time they patented this thing in 2017, by the time 2019 hit, the odds of this magically appearing in a bat at a meat market in Wuhan, at minimum was basically 1 in 3 trillion with a T. 1 in 3 trillion. And probably more like 1 in infinity. But they're just saying, as far as their mathematics can discern, 1 in 3 trillion with a T, not a D, not a B, not a M, a T as in trillion. And so 1 in 3 trillion chance that this virus would somehow appear in nature and become a worldwide pandemic. Yeah. Who'd have thunk it? And who held the patent?
Yep. Well, this was Moderna, without a doubt. And Moderna, it was a SARS-CoV-2 virus with a genetic insert. And it was so obvious once you saw it that this genetic insert could not be natural. It could not come from nature. That's the percent chance, right, that it would come from nature. So it was clearly created. It was clearly patented. We have that now. What do we think this was for?
Well, I'll tell you, there are two things it was for. Number one, Moderna, founded in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there, has never had a product that went to market. Never. All they've been doing is living off new investor money. It's almost like a pyramid scheme. And, you had Stefan Banchel, or Banchel, however he pronounces his name, running around there raising money on Wall Street and all the international markets. And they were building all these beautiful buildings and all these wonderful office facilities and desk and web pages and all that you get to go with it. And still no product going to market, but promises that we're going to cure cancer. Promises we're going to have what you noted on their website a year ago. This is like software uploading to your body, software to modify.
Gene editing.
They don't talk about that now, but they certainly did then as they were marketing.
Because they still had it up on their site.
Yeah.
You know, even in the patent, okay, what you're seeing, they found a specific sequence of the MSH3 mutation, which, by the way, that means it's an added cancer gene. Mm-hmm. So that cancer gene was added on purpose for supposedly production of oncology-related things. But ultimately, this was no accident. It was put in there on purpose, just as HIV genes were edited in. And they're talking about HIV-1. So you got cancer editing.
We now have vaccine, and we have vaccine-induced AIDS now.
Well, go ahead and type in HIV vaccines, and you're going to see Moderna, Pfizer, all of them are in the final trials of HIV vaccines. You know, they knew a couple years ago, smart them, that this would be necessary in the future. I wonder how that could have been. Well, here they have vaccines for HIV, and you've got Fauci saying, well, you know, the mRNA has given us the possibility of making this now, after he tried for 40 years and couldn't. What he did is he was funded very well to create something that could be put in a shot to be given to human beings to wipe out 2/3 of people.
Yep.
And that's what he's done.
And whether he realizes he's done it or not, I mean, he may. I'm not going to say that he does or doesn't, but I'm going to say that he doesn't let on to all that he knows. I think that he.
Of course not.
Look, 75 years to release Pfizer information, and I think the one thing that Pfizer never expected was a judge to deny them. And I'm sure that a lot of it's very redacted, a lot of it is very selective, but what little is coming out is frightening, absolutely frightening.
It is frightening, and most people aren't putting it together like you and I did.
And this is the stuff they're letting us know. I mean, they're trying. Right. I mean, they're not even doing it in sequence. They're doing it like little. Okay, we'll give this little bit out here. You know, it only has 1,291 side effects.
Well, that's right. Pages and pages of it. But this is the stuff you and I talked about. We're putting together a while ago, and we were saying it changes the DNA. It goes into the DNA. Well, now these patents, this one in particular, are showing us that the DNA repair gene, they're saying, you know, they actually can cause endometrial cancers or tumors in the uterus and other places. And they're saying, you know, when the gene fails to correct this error, these things could occur in the DNA. Really? Wow. I didn't know anything could get into the DNA.
It does.
You betcha, the genetic code.
You know, we've talked about this at length when it comes to these vaccines. The push for the boosters, because they wane in effectiveness. In other words, I also think they wane in lethality over time. Yeah. They'll damage some people permanently. They will not damage everybody permanently. They'll cause some damage that may, and notice I'm saying may be recovered. But if you keep taking this stuff and you keep weakening the immune system, so let's say you're a healthy person in your 20s, and the average person that took this vaccine in their 20s may have compromised 10 to 20% of their immune system and didn't know or didn't care because they overall were still healthy. Those that were more susceptible to heart disease, notice in 2 years' time, if you're in a grocery store and somebody has a slight case of the sniffles, we run in fear looking for face shields, face diapers, and Lysol. You know, you're going to kill me. Are you vaccinated? You know, and I mean, I know people that are like, someone mentioned that they had a fever. Now, this is a person that already had COVID once.
Right.
Oh, no, you must go away because you give us all COVID. You have fever. And it's like, come on. You know, we have made people a mild fever, you know, caused by even a sprained ankle is now going to kill people with COVID, and all the things that go with it. Yet we've normalized sudden deaths in young people on a soccer field. Oh, that's okay. That's normal. We're normalizing, as you said last week. young kids in the 5th grade having heart attacks and strokes. I mean, that's normal. Yeah. But the sniffles is, you're going to kill us with COVID. We have brainwashed about more than half of our society. About half of the society is now brainwashed to be afraid of COVID for the rest of their lives. This is going to be like a traumatic effect, like almost crashing in an airplane and never flying again.
Sure. And not only are they afraid of COVID, it's going to continue because of the spike protein everybody has in them from the shot. And just as I said, with this patent, the MSH3 mutation, which hinders the DNA repair network and causes cancer, so does the spike protein. SARS-CoV-2 spike protein impairs the DNA damage repair inhibitors. So the repair inhibitors that go to help the damage of a DNA are now put in check by the spike proteins.
And so it allows more deformation of the DNA.
You got it. And they're both put in there, and they both hinder the repair so that you get cancer. Could that be an accident? I mean, we do trust in science, don't we?
Yeah, political science.
Yeah, right. It's called faux science. Science here, scientism, rather. But what we're seeing these things happening. As I said before, I looked again this week, just my county, with people who have died, and the amount of young people in their 20s and 30s who've died suddenly, with no other explanation, suddenly. Not like a suicide here and there. That can
car wreck
happen. But, 12-year-old dies suddenly on the bus going to school. They're just dying suddenly all over the place. Young people.
And we've normalized that.
Well, yes. And when I told you a long time ago, they had a lentivirus that was put in these shots. Lenti meaning time release, right? Slow action. That's precisely what is happening. That is what you're seeing now. So when people die suddenly on the field, in the office, at home, in the sleep, nobody's going to know or put two and two together. The media doesn't make a big deal out of it. Don't even mention it unless it was on TV and it was the broadcaster who dropped dead. But other than that,
and they try to cover that up too, like we never do. They had such a history in their family of dropping dead.
Right. And meanwhile, this is happening all over the place. You are seeing the depopulation agenda unfolding before your eyes.
Well, there's one thing and you said it, and I have looked at this about 10 different ways to Sunday, that the places with the highest number, rates of vaccinations among all age groups, and those that have already jumped into the booster regime, like Israel and other nations, they have the highest rates of these unexplained people dropping dead in the middle of just doing normal everyday life in their 30s and 40s. Unprecedented.
It is, and it can only come to one. What?
But it's normal. But it's normal.
Well, here's science. Science says, what has changed recently? What factor can we add?
It's
recently?
Climate change,
right? It must be climate change. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's
I'm serious.
The shots, folks. It's called the shots.
Well, yeah, but climate change
will sweep up. Climate change is there to do the mop up job. That's what climate change is there for. They're going to come in and use that to oppress those who are left and put you in your little cubicle with the metaverse.
Before we run out of time for today, and I'm going to have you come back a little later this week. I got too many topics we'll never get to. But I was thinking the other day, the Green New Deal, the Green Raw Deal, the Green whatever deal. Stage 1, shut off our ability to make energy, which we did. We did that first class. Stage number 2, make our currency worthless by printing up too much of it, which we did in the last couple of years. Destroy the incentive for people to work, which we've done beautifully the last couple of years. Make transportation more expensive by making certain products that create these vehicles harder and harder to get. Supply chain issues, the whole list. And so here we are. We have destroyed our ability to make energy, and we've made ourselves dependent on the Middle East, on Russia, and guess who else we're going to be dependent on in the not-too-distant future? Iran. We're going to cut it. We're going to go back to the John Kerry, I fly in my private plane to tell you can't, Kerry, the most duplicitous, one of the most despicable people that ever walked around the United States Senate. The man is the total reprobate, and he's trying to cut a deal to ensure that Iran will get their nuclear weapon, though he'll tell us they won't, but they will get a nuclear weapon. And I want to close on this note today. What do you think is going to happen the day that Iran has successfully they've got a little bit of an arsenal? What's going to happen in this world?
There's always going to be a boogeyman. My question about Iran and whether they're truly going to be the boogeyman is what happened in the Iranian Revolution, and when we put an imposter Khomeini in there. Mm-hmm. Do you think that has changed? Do you think we gave up Iran and now it's the big boogeyman that we don't control?
Hard to say.
So. I don't think so.
But I think you've got enough people in that country that are looking for the caliphate, which is predicted within their brand of being Islamic.
There is that.
And then so they can rely on them for their support.
Yeah, there's an Islamic eschatology that has that philosophy, and I agree with that. I think that's more infighting among themselves. Mm-hmm. What I don't see is them being the next, I hear, the Antichrist is going to be a Muslim, and it's going to be all from Islam.
And I've heard it'll be a Jesuit, and I've heard it'll be this, and I've heard, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. I can't answer that. I've got a lot of people that we try to discuss theology, and it's hard to do because I think there's a lot designed that we do not know. And
Scripture implies to us, at least, he's going to be a Jew, and he's going to come from the tribe of Dan, but he's not going to be a worshiping Jew. He's just going to be a secular one, but that will be his lineage.
It'll be the bloodline. And that's about it.
Right.
The
That's
bloodline.
Right. And so we see that, but Iran, I don't know. I don't see Iran as the big boogeyman yet. They tried to play that card a number of years ago. They keep it there on the side, just like North Korea. They're Trump cards. Not Donald Trump.
I know.
The Trump
we understand.
Cards. But these are the Trump cards, and that's exactly what they're going to utilize. Look, they have a table full of Trump cards that they can use if they need to, if they're necessary.
Or up their sleeve anyway.
Well, you talk about the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is going to eliminate affordable energy. It's going to eliminate nuclear energy. It's going to eliminate 99% of the cars, which we're already seeing. It's going to gut and rebuild every building in America. But what is it going to be rebuilt into? Ask yourself that. It's going to eliminate air travel, which they've already started to do. It's going to guarantee government jobs. Yeah, right. And, education for life in their ideology, a salubrious diet of whatever they feel is healthy for you, like bugs. Look, do you catch what I'm saying to you? This is controlled. It's going to ban meat entirely. I don't see anything different here in communism, do you? The Green New Deal is communism. The what we're seeing, the Great Reset, is communism. All of it's coming faster than you can imagine. Okay? It is coming. And my question is, do you see it, number one, and what are you doing about it?
And Dr. Gahles, we're going to have to stop here for today. We're running out of time quite quickly. I'm going to ask you to come back later this week, perhaps on Thursday. We have so much to discuss in this very turbulent time. So much information out there, hard to digest and understand. Even some of your trusted media can't discern all this. It takes really having the Holy Spirit in your life to discern. Do you believe in the work that we're doing here at Truth to Ponder? If you do, would you consider supporting us financially to keep us on shortwave? If you can, make a check payable to Ancient Word Radio. That's Ancient Word Radio. And mail it to Truth to Ponder, 5753 Highway 85 North, 5753 Highway 85 North, number 3248. Number 3248 in Crestview, Florida 32536. Crestview, Florida, the zip code 32536. You can find out more at the website.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.